I listened to the last video that I filmed, and there's a correction that I want to make. This is technically was in fact not a rough draft. It was a final version of a paper. Everybody had to pass it in. I could have, I could have redone the paper and handed it in, and maybe he would have raised my grade a couple of points. I don't know. I thought the stuff he had to say was really, you know, not really all that fair. To be honest, I thought it was actually a pretty good paper. You know, I thought it was a pretty good paper. The things about it that were imperfect in terms of the format, and maybe some of the stuff that I didn't have time to kind of flesh out a little bit more, you know, I could understand some criticism about that. But there's no way this paper deserved an 88. There's just no way it deserved an 88. Not when he was giving everybody else a C just for passing something in, you know. And I knew from having read other people's work in that class that almost nobody could write it. Just, I mean, when they wrote a grammatically correct sentence, it was pretty much by accident, and I don't blame them. They're not stupid people. You know, I mean, I'm from a white collar family, you know, and even though we didn't have a lot of money, my parents really valued education, and they put me through a public school, you know, which really valued education, and I got a really good, you know, public school education, and I've been to college before, so, you know, I had some advantages in terms of, you know, being able to write, to read and to write, that the other people in my class didn't have, and I never blamed them for that, and I was never rude or snobby about any of it. In fact, I wrote a couple emails to him, and I wrote an email, I think one email to the chair of the department saying, wow, I just, you know, because I'd never been around it before. I'd never been, you know, around people who have probably just been in an urban school system, you know, all of their lives, who can't write, they can't write, they can't read, they can't write, they don't understand, you know. I mean, it's not that they can't understand if you take the time, but they don't really, they're not even where I was and my classmates were when I was a sophomore in high school in terms of being able to read something, to read like a short story or a novel and then get things from it and write about it analytically. And these were people who were, you know, somewhere between 18 and 25, really, you know. But I felt terrible for them. I really did. But that didn't mean that it was all right for him to give me a B when he was giving everybody else a C just for passing something in. And I'm like, because I said to him, this is the first grade we got. And I was like afraid for like, you know, what's going to happen for the rest of the semester? Am I going to end up with a B in this class? You know, because it was going to be my transcript without that explanation of whatever it is he said when he said everyone's getting a C, even if, you know, as a baseline. Okay, well, the C is not the baseline. F is the bottom. You know what I'm saying? And you got to be able to do something. But I was like, you know, other places where I try to send my transcripts are going to see this B from a community college, and they're going to think that I'm where those other students are at, and I have nothing against them. I have, you know, the utmost sympathy for them, but I know that I'm writing better than they are. And he applied another standard to my writing, and that is in fact a form of discrimination. I'm not accusing him of anything, you know, but he accused me of something that's not true. You know, the idea that somehow I was disruptive in some way, or you know, or it was just like, I mean, he harassed me in one of his classes. Stood right up there in the front of the beginning, you know, in the front of the room. The next class that we had after a class, the previous week, in which he had said he wanted debate from students. I had, you know, debated with him, you know, and then he didn't like what I had to say, so he stopped the entire thing. You know, he had us do an in-class exercise for the, you know, in the next week when he passed them back, he stood in front of the classroom and just started coughing over and over and over and over. It was very direct, you know, very obvious what he was doing. And I looked up at him and I said, can I record? You know, can I, you know, take out my tape recorder and start recording? He's like, oh, I'd rather not. And then I didn't say anything. I didn't question him. I didn't challenge him. I don't know. Maybe he was trying to provoke a reaction so he could throw me out of his classroom. You know, I haven't really talked about this before because I've been on the defensive anyway. You know, I mean, it's just like, and it's not like I have anything against this guy. I just want to be able to go to school and do what I'm there to do without having people mess it up for me for no reason. You know, I didn't do anything to anybody at that school. I haven't done anything wrong. You know, I should never have been on the defensive. I'm one of the best students. I'm one of the best students they have, I'm thinking. You know, certainly I couldn't have worked any harder. You know, I happen to have a life outside of school, most of which is something I can't do anything about. Most of which is just something I can't do anything about. You know, but it's just like the idea that I put so much effort into it, and it got ruined by someone who, you know, maybe just was greedy for a little bit, you know, saw an opportunity for me to get some attention, you know, in a business that he, you know, wants to be successful at, because quite clearly, you know, being a teacher is just his day job. He really wants to be a writer, and I don't have a problem with that, but he didn't have a right to step on me to try to make that happen, you know, because I just didn't do anything to this guy. I didn't do anything to him. You know, one of the things I pointed out to him was, you know, you say you're, you know, interested in blue collar literature. Here I am living in a homeless shelter. You don't care if I have access to a real computer, you know, and yet everything basically, most of the stuff he had us read was mostly just, you know, guys behaving badly, you know, and women getting abused. Even the stuff that he had, you know, us read that was like, you know, not just, you know, white guys talking. A lot of it was just kind of these, you know, victim stories. And I was like, look, if you're going to present women in another way, other than being a victim, you're going to have to kind of go into the middle class and upper classes a little bit, unfortunately, because they're women who have written, you know, in those classes. Those are the ones who had the ability, who had the time, who had literacy to do it. But I don't know if he thought, it's so funny because on the one side of it, he was pretty resistant to that. And I don't know what he went and told people, like, oh, you know, like, I have all this, you know, feeling for people in the lower classes and she's homeless, but I just can't deal with it. And then I end up, meanwhile, he's resisting what he thinks of as being my intellectual snobbery. Then I end up in the dean's office and she's like, you know, you've been homeless, so you're too messed up to be here. You know, I mean, it's just like, everybody's got something to say. And it all adds up to my getting nowhere, no matter how much work I do. You know, I don't feel a grudge about any of this. It's over, it's in the past. Except for me, it's not. Because now I have to go back to school in a couple of weeks, you know, and what is that going to be like? You know, who's going to mess it up for me this time?